century of investing wisdom time. Moderating this session will be Mr. Ajay Sharma, news editor, markets anchor ET Now. Mr. Ajay tracks the investing landscape and global macros closely, joining the dots to make a bigger picture. Tracking stock moving developments and domestic industry trends is key part of his focus area, apart from interviews with industry leaders and fund managers. Thank you so much, Mr. Ajay Sharma, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and we at ETNO really cherish our relationship with PMS Bazaar. Year after year, they bring some great content and great market dialogue for the industry. So great to be here.
Absolutely, sir. It's absolute pleasure having you here this Saturday morning. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of it and moderating our session. So, quickly, with your permission, I'm going to be introducing our panelists as well for the day. First up, we have Mr. Ramdeo Agarwal, the chairman of Motilal Oswal Financial Services. The driving force behind the company's approach to investing, Mr. Ramdeo Agarwal brings with him a lot of experience. Mr. Agarwal has created the quality, growth, longevity, and favorable price investment process and its buy right, sit tight investing philosophy. He has been authoring the annual Motilal Oswal Wealth Creation Study since its inception in the year 1996. So, joining us, our first panelist, Mr. Ramdeo Agarwal. Moving on, we have Mr. Bharat Shah, Executive Director, ASK Group. He is a commerce graduate from the University of Bombay and a postgraduate diploma in management from IIM Calcutta. He is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the Institute of Cost and Work Accountants of India. He has over 25 plus years of experience with financial markets. Mr. Hiren Ved, the co-founder, CEO, and CIO of Alchemy Capital, joins us today as our panelist. He has built a long-term track record of generating significant alpha over the last 18 plus years, managing and advising funds worth USD 782 million across domestic PMS and offshore institutional mandates for Alchemy. Thank you so much, Mr. Hiren, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd also like to quickly announce Mr. Samir Arora, founder and fund manager, Helios Capital. He's going to be joining us as well today. Mr. Samir Arora received his undergraduate degree in engineering from the IIT New Delhi in the year 1983. And his MBA, he is a gold medalist from the IIM Calcutta in the year 1985. He has also received a master's degree in finance from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania in 1992. So Mr. Samir has a total investing experience of 29 plus years. What a fantastic panel it is today, with so much of legacy, with so much of experience. So it's definitely going to be one hell of a session with a lot of, gyan and investments. So with no further ado, I just quickly want to once again just tell you that we are going to be waiting for our panelists to join in as well. We've got two more people. But in the meantime, if Mr. Ajay would like to start off the session and if he has any questions, yes, we have Mr. Ramdeo Agarwal joining us. Like I said, with the things going virtual, sometimes we have to sort of keep in mind that we have a lot of these other things that we don't have quite control of, right? So we're just going to wait for Mr. Ramdeo to get into the frame, and then we can start. Over to Mr. Ajay.
Right. Thanks very much for that, Shruti. And first of all, I'd like to thank PMS Bazaar, who have been, conducting this PMS AIF Summit for this is the third year in a row, and creating some really good dialogue and analysis comes out of these events. And ETNO, of course, have been the partner right from the beginning. So it's a great association. Thanks very much for organizing this, Daniel and Pallav. And today, of course, Samir, Ramdevji, Hiren, I think Bharat Bhai will join in a minute. It's such a wonderful, it's an honor for me to really be chatting with all the 3-4 people here, very experienced. As they say, that there are no, there's absolutely no, you cannot replicate experience in this market, and in every cycle, the experience helps you make lesser mistakes and you get sharper, and of course, pattern recognition. So right now, for this panel, the theme would be, what can we learn from very experienced people like Samir, Ramdev, Hiren, and Barabai? Samir, let me start with you. They say that experience really counts. This is a game you get better with each passing cycle. The mistakes go down, they are smaller, and you survive cycles. Tell me something from your own experience. And this is also a cycle which many of us have really survived and kind of come back, though a bit shell shocked if you talk of March. Talk to us a little bit about some of the learnings at this stage after 25, 30 years. Uh, what do you see when you see the investing horizon? What are you confident about?
So clearly, there are many, many lessons, and you learn at the expense of the initial investors, which you may have
Sure.
started with 25 years ago. Because basically, you're paying a cost for learning, and as you go, you may make new mistakes, but mostly your old mistakes you try not to repeat. So if you look at, say, my history, in the beginning, we were very gung-ho in the olden days about infrastructure sector, because the big picture presented in India always is that India is 20 years behind the world on infrastructure, and infrastructure is a good, stable, sustainable business once it is implemented. So the first thing we learned over the years is that an infrastructure project that is in the pipeline or that is in construction is no project as far as India is concerned, because there has been all the losses in all these infra type projects. Other things we learned over the years was not to overly depend on orders coming from government, big orders to construction companies or road companies or whatever, if they are from the government. So every day you will learn and eliminate things that you will not do, rather than saying what you will do. Because what you will do, everybody knows. I will buy good managements and good companies and good valuations, except that that will also never happen. It will happen only in some extreme cases, like end of 2008, that you might say, oh, it was a good company, but it was trading at below its lowest ever. Broadly, there will always be a trade-off, because very rarely will you find everything combining, except in some extreme market situation. So there are many, many lessons, and we'll go as we go, but let's ask the others also. Otherwise, I
Sure.
could talk for an hour on this.
Sure. Ramdev, let me come to you now. What has biggest lesson been for you this cycle? We were just a couple of days back, we were on a panel, and it was so humble and honest of you that you did admit that for some time, at least for a short period of time, you were also quite shocked of the way market was melting in March. But what did you learn? What was your biggest learning of this crisis, or or maybe previous cycle which you applied in this cycle?
I think the grand idea of Indian stock market, Bharat Bhai and Samir both are there, and it is fun to listen to them. But the mistakes are so many. In fact, let me read a quote which just remind on
Sure.
mistakes. If a man is both wise and lucky, he will not make the same mistake twice, but he will make any one of the 10,000 brothers or cousins of the original. The
Right.
mistake field is so large that there is always one of them around you when you want to see what you can do in the full play line. You know, this mistake, there is no end to it, and every market will make you do new one. You'll find a completely new one, but you'll commit mistakes. Beyond doubt, you'll commit mistakes. So let's not bother about. I mean, I would say that don't bet on bad guys. Bad managements. Few mistakes which are very costly and very more than money. It was very humiliating and kind of it was stressful to go through those bad guys. So that is one thing I would definitely avoid. Bad managers will never take you to heaven; they'll always take you to hell. Finally, I mean, in the for 2, 3 years, 4 years, you'll have a nice ride, and that is what everybody wants. But every bad manager has taken you to the hell. And in fact, one instance I remember where one guy came from North Bombay to South Bombay because of the company, which went from say 200 crores to 80,000 crores, and that same company brought disasters for many guys. The guys who entered at 80,000 came back to bankruptcy. So So people would like to, in the same company, somebody has made millions and somebody has lost his millions. So, but the new mistakes keep coming. But over a period of time, some of the mistakes which I have committed, or it happened, was like a bad betting on the bad management. And increasing, I'm realizing that betting on a high price, chasing the stocks, chasing the popular stocks, very popular stock, very popular means you cannot go wrong. And so much so that when I'm managing public money, this is my first round in 5-6 years. The managers, they hate to talk anything against that very popular company, which is not going to make him money. I mean, if you ask him, what is your IRR? 5%, 6%. But if you ask him, why don't you sell it, sir? This is that. So I'm realizing the biggest source of maybe underperformance, not so much the performance, is the buying into very, very popular companies. You cannot go wrong types. So that's one thing I am saying. So these are the kind of things you keep learning. I mean, as we go along, many more things we'll learn. But the family of cousins and sisters and brothers of
Yeah.
mistakes are too big.
Bharat bhai, as everybody calls you the granddaddy of Indian markets, how have you seen the market change, the market of today versus it was? I remember last time also on this forum, you said that you have to really focus and cut the noise and stick to fundamentals and valuations. These days, in this kind of investing environment, how do you find it different than yesteryears?
By your mute.
Bharat bhai, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, is the voice clear?
Yeah, it's clear now. Please go ahead.
No, just the fact that noise is increased, that's about it. Otherwise, it remains the same.
Right. Okay. So noise is something which you're finding it's too much. Otherwise, the market is same, right?
No, markets are what they are. I don't think it is our business to judge markets. And unfortunately, even the brightest minds among us cannot resist the temptation of trying to judge the markets, evaluate them, try to make kind of intelligent inferences about it, that it will do this, it will do that. But in my opinion, these are futile attempts. The markets represent distilled collective intelligence, which is much higher, much superior than any one of us can bring to bear. This is not to say that markets don't make mistakes. Markets often do. Sometimes they make horrible mistakes. But over a period of time, the kind of collective understanding, sharp intellect, razor sharp vision about the truth that markets bring to the table is something which is worth applauding and appreciating. That none of us individually, or even many bright minds put together, also will be able to outwit. You have only meaningful chance of beating the investment game when you are focused on trying to judge stocks and their prices and their values, and hence their likely prices in the future. When you try to apply the same metrics to try to do that through the model of judging markets, then I think your rate of failure is going to be much higher, because markets trying to do the investing game by judging markets and profiting from it is an exercise attempted by many minds, but usually met with failure. And even if the successes are there, these are occasional and not replicable long term. So one, I I I have a very so to say respectful relationship I keep in my mind towards the markets. Not that I treat the word of markets as a gospel truth, but at the same time, I do not want to make a mistake of assuming that markets are stupid. Markets don't know what they do. Some of the economists, famous economists in world and in India, try often with despair, making some sense about current market behavior. Some of the ex-RBI governors have attempted to do that. But we have to remember that markets represent the furious forever. I think there is some noise in the background. Markets represent a forever furious kind of a futuristic pricing machine. While most of the humanity tries to live either into the past or at least think about the present. Whether markets always get the future right or not is beside the point, but they are steadfastly focused on judging the future, trying to make a meaningful inference out of it, discount it back to the present to make it at parity with the time value of money, and then bet the real money where the mouth of the markets is lying. And that, I think, compared to any armchair economist or a journalist or other bystanders and opinion makers, is far, far superior. At least over a period of time, it is invariably shown that ability to judge the future by and large of the markets is far superior. And therefore, the minds which are stuck in the past and present only to the exclusion of the future or material exclusion of the future would have a great challenge dealing with the investments in particular markets in general.
Sure. Hiren, let me come to you. What's your own sense of pattern recognition for your own in the last 25, 27 years of being around each cycle? Are you finding yourself better in pattern recognition? Does experience get accumulated and compound itself and hence makes you stronger in that area?
Well, the fun is that by the time you figure out the previous pattern, there is a new pattern being made in the market. So you're always struggling to decipher patterns. I think more than patterns, I would say that it's very important to be adaptable, right? I remember that during the boom in IT, a lot of people said that how can these companies grow at this rate and make so much money, and how can they trade at this P, and we don't understand this business, right? And I think it was not a flash in the pan. I mean, that sector is now 25, 30 years old. Obviously, the growth rates have tailed off. But even if you didn't understand, if you made an attempt to understand, at some point in time, you would have profited from the trend. And I think today, some of the wisest investors, like Mr. Buffett himself has said that he probably made a mistake not buying some of the technology stocks because he did not understand them, right? And I think that, for example, even amongst us, we can't make out as to what valuations we should give to the FANG stocks, or whether these are sustainable, not sustainable, it's a bubble. But I think it is very, very important to understand, and if we have to respect one time-tested principle of the market, is that markets are intelligent and superior, and if they are trading these companies at the valuations that they are trading at, there has to be something that we need to take away from them and learn from them, right? And if for whatever reason value has not worked for a very, very long period of time, and I'm not saying that value therefore will never work, but there is a reason why it has not worked, and it is important to spend some time to reflect on why the markets are doing something that they are doing and learn from it, rather than trying to predict any pattern. Like, I'll tell you today, for example, what I find very amusing, which is very much in the news, is this whole thing about lockdown trade and unlock trade. And people are trying to grapple to say, do I have any lockdown trade, unlock trades? I think, you can say that's a pattern, and maybe this pattern is relevant because the COVID crisis is here and now. But my sense is that 12 months down the line, all of this lockdown and unlockdown may be completely useless, right? So I wouldn't try to read too much into patterns, except that yes, there is one thing which we all have learned in the past cycles, is that whenever a long-term cycle breaks, right, there is always, because what has been working continues to work, and we continue to draw a straight line, and maybe there is euphoria, maybe there is a lot of consensus in that area, and then the market shakes off for whatever reason. Like COVID was a great reason to shake off things, and there is a self-correcting mechanism where things which were way overpriced may get recorrected, and there is always new leadership that comes in. So things which you wanted to buy but you were afraid to buy because they weren't going up, suddenly start to go up. So for example, everybody scrambled to add exposure to pharma immediately after the COVID crisis because it went up, right?
Correct.
So I think it is more important to be adaptable and learn from the markets rather than trying to predict any patterns or cycles, frankly.
Sure.
I'll just-
Samir, Bharat bhai, go ahead. Please add.
Yeah, to the patent recognition that Hiren alluded to, I think the first and most important one is to recognize our own mind, our own failings, our own limitations, our own ability to understand, our own ability to make intelligent predictions and conjectures, and our own, in general, fallibility. So, like Thales, one of the greatest Greek philosophers, once said, the first stage of the wisdom is knowing thyself, that you must know yourself well. Markets are what they are, and there is precious little you can do about changing anything about markets. Markets will remain volatile, sometimes more, sometimes less. Markets will try to induce you into making opinions, whether relevant or otherwise. But markets will do what they have to do, and volatility will remain more or less at different points of time. How do you intelligently align your own mind to benefit from it, to recognize that behavioral pattern of the markets rather than becoming a victim of those patterns of the market? That is where the trick is lying. Which is
Right.
why I think the greater act in investing is that of wisdom of recognizing the inevitability of the markets as they stand, and to benefit from that rather than to become kind of an unintended victims.
Right. There's a very important point Bharat bhai brought to the table, that in fact there is a saying that if you don't know yourself, then stock markets is a very expensive place to find that out. And knowing yourself in a thorough way, I think, is very important to be successful in the long run. Samir, let me come to you. I've always seen, you have a, of course, the organization is, you trade as well, a bit long, short, both side. What are your thoughts on, the reason I'm asking this question is that a lot of people who are watching this, people mix productivity with activity in the market. How important is, what proportion of your overall daily life should be research and finding out things than be active in the market all the time? What are your thoughts there?
Before that, I think that the market has changed a lot since the 90s, and it
Sure.
is quite purist to say that we should not know about the market, because, for example, Warren Buffett has underperformed the market for 19 years because he, I think, did not realize that the market has changed in the sense that there is higher disruption, that there is private equity money. Let's look at India. So in the 90s, when Bharat and I were mutual fund managers, we were beating the market by some 20-30% per annum, not the 5-10% that we may do now, because there were new sectors. Those were completely, we were entering the world. We were competing with government, our private companies were competing with government-owned companies. So that was the market. Today, we can't say that tech, we are new, that pharma, we are new. We can't say that we are killing the public sector companies because mostly they have already been killed. So to understand the market in that sense, secondly, the private equity means that a lot of returns that could have come into the public market investors kitty, because these companies would have got listed earlier. For example, we bought in those days Z at a market cap of $50 million. These days, a company which is the biggest company in any sector, you not get. And these things are important. Look at disruption. So let us say a cornflake company. Who would have imagined that a cornflake company can be disrupted, but suddenly somebody says, no, sugar is bad. Now, we can say it's an economy issue, but basically, according to us, it's a market issue, that the market has changed a lot. But one or two things have not changed. That a large number of companies will do well in any market, whether you do more research or less research or no research. It is by definition that a large number of companies will do well, because the way we define the market is to say average of, say, 500 companies. So if you are saying that the S&P 500, let's say, the average of that is the market. So broadly speaking, 40% of them will beat that average a lot, and 30% will really take the pants off that average, and 25% will go beyond limit. So if you look at it like that, at all times, not 5 companies or 3 companies or 10 companies are doing well, but 100 companies are doing well. And we have done this analysis that not one of us has even got the performance of even the 100th stock of that market every year. 100th stock, not the average of the first 100 stocks. Nobody in the US has got the performance of the 150th stock performance of the S&P 500. I mean, maybe somebody got it in a year or two, but not. So the point is two things, according to me, that a large number of companies will do well, and you will not know which company is going to do really well. You may know that some companies will do well, but the really well companies are going to be a surprise to themselves more than they will be to you. Because otherwise, if you look at any company, you can say, if they knew that they were going to be like this, why did they sell private equity so early? Why did Steve Jobs not buy Apple shares when he had so much 8 billion of Disney shares? Why did Ramdev Agarwal and I bought iShares in 2009 thinking that they are going to export some engines? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. If Rajiv Jain knew that Bajaj Finance is going to become a $40 billion company, he would have not started working with the option that he had maybe at that day. In that time, he would not have known. Nobody knows. All you know is that some bad things will not work. So you do bad valuation, bad history, bad governance, bad, some sector, and then you play the serendipity of the market that a large number of companies will do well. And then you buy more as you go along. But I totally reject the idea that I know today which company is doing well and I should have 15% of my fund in that company, because that is just luck beyond limits of luck.
And it is also acting like God.
Yeah, that also may be. Correct.
So, surely I get your point. And
so I forgot your actual question. What was your actual question that you asked?
What I wanted to ask you was activity versus preparation.
Yeah. So in the activity, the thing is that in general, if you are really pure research, whatever, and you are buying 15 companies and you say that you will hold them for 10 years, and let us say one of those companies is HDFC Bank. What exactly are you supposed to do every day with that now? What are you supposed to do? What will you do if you own Nestle or something? Will you, just because you want to go shopping, you'll go to your kirana guy and say, hello, how many chocolates did you sell today? The point is, if you bought a good company and you believe in it, just relax then. So there should be no activity. And also when you have a quarterly result, before a quarterly result, what are you supposed to prepare? Nothing. Because on the day of the result, if instead of 21% growth, the HDFC Bank grows 20%, you are supposed to say, who cares? And secondly, if it grows 15%, you will say, let me check the actual results. Let me go to the conference call and see if there was some one-off. If it grows minus 10%, for that it was worth it maybe to react in a second. So point is, you can't have it both ways. There has to be activity, otherwise you're not supposed to have any work. Because if you buy long term, you have bought quality, once in a while something will change, but how will you every day follow it? For what will you do? Because you put a Google alert on that company. and every nonsense that comes out you will read. So if you really believe that there is to be noise has to be ignored, Bharat Shah should be doing no work every day because he's bought the best companies that he likes and he has them, or any of us. So I say this is not activity. It is this is what it is which keeps us alive after 25 years doing the same thing and saying that we want to do it for 20 more years.
More years. No, but that point which you said that about a third of companies will do really well, and we are in the
That is
business of.
mathematics. That is
Sure. No, I'm
mathematics.
saying that a clutch of companies, and it's all game of
Correct.
investors striving to have larger proportion of those companies in their own portfolio. How can we prepare for it? Ramdev, would you like to take that question? How should an investor go about building the portfolio? How to identify that universe where one can go shopping and then build a portfolio, track it, keep tweaking it a bit wherever required? But what should that preparation be like? Ramdev, you're in mute, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a very good question in the sense that the performance must be appraised by you as well as the outsiders at a portfolio level. And actually, performance happens at a company level. I mean, portfolio is kind of it's a amalgamation of a lot of companies and a whole lot of things. So what I realize is that your advantage at portfolio level is much lower compared to the market than at a company level. Because at company level, you can be in a situation to know a lot more than the market, hopefully. But at a portfolio level, when it comes to 20, 25, 30 companies, typically you lose the track of that sharpness about knowing a company. And this I'm talking about 25, 30 companies. If you are 70, 80 companies, then I mean, really, you don't have that edge. So my sense is with the ETF coming in, one of the fundamental change between 90s and now, which I'm grappling, and Samir, Bharat Bhai and all, I mean, you should be asking this question: how exactly the world is going to change under ETF? Because the incremental money in US, which is mother of all the markets, has become passive. More than 100% is passive. Active is going on to passive, and incremental flow is also going passive. So that fundamentally, and money is dumb money in the sense that all the retail which used to buy, I mean, all active managers, they used to have fun at the cost of retail guys. Now they're all going to passive. So they have become very smart. Actually, retail has become very smart through, the basic bar has been raised by buying into average of the market. So how do you beat that averages of the market? Because and they don't look at the valuation. See, our game is to have a superior understanding of valuation. When the index doesn't care a damn about the valuation, and tomorrow he'll buy. If you dump 1 lakh crore, he is going to buy 10% into Reliance or whatever is the number one stock, irrespective of what is the valuation. So when you are looking at a valuation, you will go and sell, and ETF is going to buy, which is what is happening right now. So this is a different change world. Acha, ETF is not popular in India, but all the global guys who are buying into India, they are buying only ETF. So I think this is a very complex world, which was not there. We are not grown up with that. And so the performance challenge at a portfolio level is very tough compared to performing even if ETF is there. I think performing at a company level is quite possible. But getting an edge on 2025 stock, individual companies, and hence on the portfolio is also becoming tougher because span of focus on 25 companies is far lower than a span of focus on 2 or 3 or 4 companies.
But Ramdev, I disagree with this. What if you are two fund managers jointly managing a fund? So the point is, it's not that. It is not that you can't. It's not a matter of effort because you have a big organization. You could say 3 guys are looking after 25 stocks. Yeah. And so, but I don't think that is the reason. The thing is that nobody knows beyond a point what will happen. It is not so much the fact that you could not keep who's the he. Because your he could be a committee of 3 equally experienced guys and they may still underperform because nobody knows anything about anything beyond a point. And this we have seen from hundreds of examples. I think it's more conceptual. Let's say there are 100 people who are investing in a concentrated way in 10 stocks each because they know something. Now, if you assume that some of the stocks are common and some are not common, that means effectively these clued-in investors think that some 200, 300, or even up to 1,000 stocks are worth concentrating on. So almost by definition, 100 concentrated investors means and some 5 will be right and some 5 will be horribly wrong, just like the market. So it is not the concentrated strategy that is working or not working. It is the guy who got 5 stocks right is working, and the guy who got 5 stocks wrong but were concentrated was not working. And therefore, it's not, I think, to do with your getting a grip on it. You please make it a combined 3 people team, it will still have the same
Still have the same.
effect.
Bharat bhai, you saying something?
Yes, I'll just add a bit to it.
Sure.
While Ramdev ji said it is getting tougher, without any question. But whether it is impossible, I would say no. Certainly it is tougher, and whoever said that investing is easy, investing remains a challenge of a forever nature, and to make meaningful returns and to get superior returns compared to the benchmarks, both are important and intelligent challenges to be met with. But it's possible to do when a few things come together. One, you have to have a very disciplined filtering of the noise from the signal. And therefore, time to time, there will be names which will get popular. Time to time, there will be fashions which will acquire an age in the eyes of the bystanders. And it is important to recognize that there will be noise, but it's important to remain focused on the merits and the signals. Therefore, if you have good filters, which have proven over a period of time that using those filters have indeed created value, and using all of those filters together rather than in a maverick way one and some and not using the others will not do the trick. Second is discipline. We far more money is made by remaining with reasonably good names over long enough period, rather than trying to do the most and the highest astute stock selection. This is not to say that stock selection is not important. Of course, it is at the crux. But I'm saying more than the best name selected, discipline, temperament, and wisdom of staying with the good names without becoming temperamental during the swing phases of the market to do this and to do that, or to swing from one to another. These mental afflictions are actually one of the biggest issues in terms of getting really good returns over a period of time. Third, I would also say, while a very high degree of concentration has its own risk, a very high degree of diversification has its own mediocrity and challenge. You have to find a good via media between the two. That's not a problem of mathematics and science. It's a problem of experience, understanding, and insights over the period of time. So that part of the art that you need to manage is something that you figure out over a period of time, that what kind of diversification is appropriate and what kind of concentration is actually judicious. And when you deviate way too much from either, then I think you're inviting trouble. One final point, what Samir has been mentioning, and I quite agree with him, there is only so much we know. And I think we shouldn't attempt to be gods. We can know reasonably. We can have a reasonable methodologies. We, more importantly, need to have mental makeup and discipline to play by it on a right way over proven methods and strategies. But at the end of the day, we all have to remain aware and open to the understanding that there will be times that there is only so much you know. There'll be a lot of times when you'll know nothing about something, and there'll be a lot of times that you'll know well enough about many things. And I think it's important to remain on the areas where you think you know well enough and where you think you have a competitive advantage. And finally, what Hiren earlier talked about, the adaptability. There is no terra firma of a permanent nature. It is a terra equa, and all the time we have to learn to adjust, adapt, revisit our assumptions. Therefore, investing remains a very eclectic mix of both conviction as well as doubts, confidence as well as concerns, and judgment as well as possibility of knowing that there will be failures. It is when we adapt all of these together and weave it into a kind of a kaleidoscope, then I think we have a better chance to be achieving two results: absolute positive results over a period of time, and second, superior results compared to whatever are important benchmarks. And both need to be achieved over a period of time. And I think at least for the length of time in this country, which is going to be significant growth economy of the world, I don't think that is, at least in my mind, any meaningful doubt. There will be enough businesses which will do better than the economy, which itself will be one of the best ones in terms of the growth rate. And if we are able to find few out of those superior firms which will do even better, then I think, and we have discipline to be there for long run. I think most of the key elements to make it work should at least reasonably be in place.
Right. Hiren, in fact, just taking that point further, I was also logged into some of the recent conference calls of the managements after the second quarter results. I heard you asking a lot of questions to many of the managements. And so I just want to understand from you, again, for the benefit of a lot of budding investors and our viewers today, how do you identify or how do you probe or track companies which have the capability or ability to ride through rough periods of phases as well, through the cycles, because they are the ones which rebound faster? And we have umpteen examples of this crisis as well, companies which have rebound faster. Any thoughts over there?
Look, I think attending conference calls and asking questions to companies is just to keep understanding more and more about the business. Ultimately, neither the actions in the short term that the managements do is going to really matter in the long run, frankly. And my belief is that in the very short run, management themselves know far less, and we are trying to find too many answers at a period. I mean, what is a management going to tell you when there is a lockdown, right? I mean, it is we who go and tell them that, okay, what is the recovery rate? And I think it's only over a period of couple of cycles that you would know that if they have grown and they continue to grow despite what happens in the environment, that's what you call a good management. Then you know that it's a good company, right? So in a life cycle of 10 years, if there are 3 instances where there was almost a near death kind of experience in a particular sector or a company, and they were able to adapt and move ahead, then that tells you that you're doing something right. And it has happened in several sectors across companies. So I think that just asking questions and getting answers is just to satisfy your curiosity and learn. It may not necessarily be a trigger to take any action. And I think I use, and I think Samir alluded to that, is that we know very little about companies. We know quite a lot about companies over a period of time. How they act when there is a crisis, what did they do, so on and so forth. And perfectly great companies have also made mistakes. Like all the good and great companies, many of them in 2008-9 went and acquired companies abroad and are still dealing with the after effects of that. So I think these are these quarterly results and yearly results are just to keep yourself abreast that whether is the company continuing to do what it has done, or if there is something new that it has done, is it working or not working for them, right? More than a decision point. So I think filtering companies, it's like an ad that you give when you want to look for a suitable boy or a girl, right? So you say he has to be of a certain height, he has to look good, he has to be educated, he has to be from a good family, he has to have good parentage. Now, all of these are good attributes, but that doesn't mean after you marry that person that person will turn out to be the best boy that or a girl that you want. These are necessary attributes. Now, once you start living with that partner, you will really get to know what the partner is all about. It may tick all the boxes like ROE hai, growth hai, X hai, cash flow hai. But will it turn out to be a great company? Who knows? You only get to know over time. And as you get to know over time, you decide you want to fall in love with it or you don't want to fall in love with it, right? So I think it's like that. And many times people come and ask that how do you select a company, and I said we all have our frameworks to select a company, and but it is like me taking an interview. What do you do in an interview? You get you have a CV of a guy, which is like me reading the annual report and all the research reports and everything. So I read everything. Then I ask questions to the person by interviewing him. It's like me interviewing the management of the company, right? Yeah. And then based on the answers, I try to take a intelligent judgment call whether I want to hire that person or not, right? So I do all of that and I buy the stock. The fun starts after that. After you've hired the person, then you know the real worth of that person in the organization over 2 years, 3 years. What does he do under pressure? Can I give him extra responsibilities? All the characteristics that you think that you would know on day one, you only get to know over a period of time, right? And I say that the same thing is with the stocks. You put a foot in the door, you have a hypothesis, you think everything is going to go right, but then you watch over a period of time and then you learn more about the person. And that's when you understand whether this guy, is really worth being a part of your organization. So it's like taking an interview, and then you have a reference check. So we all do our channel checks, and we will discuss and we will ask 2 dealers, and you do the same thing. You do a channel check on a potential employee by calling up his ex-employee and asking kya lagta hai. Finally, you only get to know after you've spent enough time, and I think that's what it is all.
What Hiren is saying. If I have to kind of summarize, learning and reviews are forever in investing. And more often than not, it is, whether errors of omission or errors of commission. When you are constantly reviewing, one of the most important things that you are at least likely to achieve more successfully is to avoid the errors of commission. Both hurt, errors of omission and errors of commission, but errors of commission give a body blow and psychologically also set you back. And therefore, reviews, understanding, revising, re-revising, understanding over years and decades, at least relatively will expose you less to the chances of errors of commission. And it is errors of commission which are very, very important to eliminate as many as you can from the scheme of things.
Samir, you want to add to that? I saw you smiling on that. Any examples that you want to give?
To one question, because I have this issue with somebody who comes to me and says, let me now, because I've met him today as a potential investor, he'll say, now let me review you from today. I say, why? Just because you were not invested for the last 10 years doesn't mean you can't review that. So my question to Hiren was not necessary that the stock has to enter the portfolio for you to review whether it's good or not. In that sense, Even if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not owning it, you can review it. So that's not the point. Because I keep defending that when some new guy comes to me and says, "Okay, now I'll track you." I said, "Why you can track when you were
Earlier
you didn't
also.
know me?" So it's that was I was smiling.
No, I want to ask you, that earlier point which you made, that one needs to build a position than buying the entire thing outright. As you review, as you study, you keep buying and you build a
So
position.
yeah. So for us, it's like two kinds of stocks. One is what we call high confidence in reasonable return. These are stocks like the private sector banks or some MNCs or maybe TCS or these tech type guys. You have chosen 10 odd companies from 30 or from 50 odd companies, which you think that you are not discovering them today. You can't keep saying I discovered them in 95. Today everybody knows. All we are saying is that these companies have the market and the management and all that to get you a reasonably high earnings growth, but you're not going to get any re-rating. Okay, so the idea is that okay, this will be a backbone to the fund and maybe should be half the fund, and maybe say 5% type per name. And the other half is where also you find nothing wrong with them on the 7-8 factors that we have, like industry and any history, corporate governance, etc., financial accounting, but you don't know. Or it could be a stock which is down a lot. So for example, IndusInd was recently down 65%. Now we thought that it is no way that it is not a survivor. But how much will you buy? You can't buy 10% even though you think. So the thing is, the second group, now we don't own it by the way because it went up 45% this month. But I'm saying in general, the idea is that the second group also is similar to the first, except that it's very new or an old name which is down a lot. So now somebody can be a hero and say, I'll buy 8-10% in that, but we will buy 2-3% in that. And so totally we'll have 30 to 35 names. But what I object to every time is these old theories of Buffett type guys who would say, why are you buying the 20th stock? Why didn't you buy more of the 14th stock that you already had? On that I say, because nobody knows. And beyond a point, you can't compare to what you think are good stocks. So spend your effort in throwing out the bad, and 80% of the job will be done. Then trying to compare two good stocks which you think are good is unnecessary and artificial, and is just there to fit into some old notion that I should have 10 stocks and not 20 stocks because I can't research 20 stocks. You're not supposed to research every day. What are you supposed to do? I still haven't understood. That's why I read so many books. What am I
Yeah.
supposed to do with these guys who I have chosen over so many years? Again, next morning I start. So the point is, you don't need that much time as it is made out to be. And of course,
Sure.
you're not one guy. There'll be 6-8 guys in the research or fund management or whatever.
But actually, that brought me.
That's the thing.
So yeah, actually, that's the common thread among all four of you, and I think investing as a subject, reading. Ramdev, what are you reading these days? In the lockdown in Lonavala, you must have got a lot of time. What all interesting subjects you've gone through recently?
I was referring to a book called Big Mistakes, The Best Investors and Their Worst Investments. So I was quoting from that. So there, the first one is Benjamin Graham himself. And there he says, I think it is worth, reflecting on that.
into it.
Because, yeah, because this is all, so he says, in my nearly 50 years of experience in Wall Street, I found that I know less and less about what the stock market is going to do, and I know more and more about what investors ought to do. And that's a pretty vital change in the attitude. That's the
That's what.
core. Yeah, that's what we are discussing, because market is becoming even more complex by the day. I mean, he wrote in 70s. I mean, today market is like raised to power 10 or 15. It is more complex. So I think markets will do crazy things. And now with the ETFs around and global money and whatnot, and the derivative money, zero cost money, very hot money, geopolitical, I don't know what all angles are there, but complexity has increased many-fold. So, but then you as an investor, how do you become more disciplined in I would say, indisciplined environment or unpredictable environment? How do you become rational and disciplined. That's what is going to
Determined.
and I think the second one thing I realize, managing private money and managing public money with all the humility to manage it the way you would manage your own money. I think the biggest challenge is to manage public money in a very honest way. I mean, I'm not blaming the clients. Clients are not that bad. I mean, clients are very patient and very nice. But yet your own creation of, you're comparing with a peer set, you're comparing with on a daily basis, on a half yearly basis, you're comparing with the index. So you are creating your own pressure. I mean, the poor chap is not asking you like that. But if you have created your own behavioral, kind of a pressure.
Bharat bhai,
because of
you
public
also
money.
feel the same?
You want to be.
You also.
Feel the same about what?
Bharat bhai, you also manage one of the biggest PMSs in the country for a long period of time. Do you also sometimes have to reflect on this about comparing performance, all of that?
Sorry, can you repeat? I still didn't get comparing.
No, Ramdev just mentioned about the difference between managing private money or own money or public money, which is client money. And in client money, there are other factors at play. I was asking you also. Okay.
I see no dissonance between the two. I don't have two ways of looking at investments, whether for money that has to be managed for the clients or money that has to be managed for self. I don't have any such dissonance or any such concern. I've seen great degree of evolution of maturity of the clients over a period of time. So I've dealt with enough clients while being and remaining an investor to say that with a fair degree of confidence. That clients in general have matured, evolved a great deal. They have a far better understanding of what to expect from investments and how to think about it or conceive it. So I actually found really no dissonance between personal and the clientele. Secondly, challenges and difficulties and tension and stress and excitement and joy, all these are part and parcel of the cycles of investing. And I think we have to just take it as given. So I honestly enjoy those challenges. I don't have any overbearing worries about it. So no doubt, I mean, when you go through a cycle like 2008-9, it's not a very pleasant experience. Or when you see the kind of catastrophic drops during the time of 2000 to 2002, or even in the March 2020 and April and May, or whatever period, you do have doubts, you do have concerns, you do have a lot of worries, and you question all the time whether you really are judging well or there is a mistake. But throughout this period, we have remained invested, we have remained committed, and isn't when we've been able to get more and more capital, we have put it to use without flinching our eyes. So I honestly, I enjoy both the stress and joy of the investing. I don't find it any two different pockets of my psyche. And the same applies to the thinking about client money as well as personal capital. There is no dissonance in my mind at all.
Samir, what are you reading these days?
Right
Or
now I'm
something
reading
recent?
Americana. Americana. It's a great book. It's a book written by an Indian guy, Indian origin guy in US, about 400 years of capitalism. One chapter on one story on like how taxes came about, how prohibition came, 400 years of these. It's a great book. But before that I read a book which I recommend, which is The Future is Faster Than You Think. So this book is good because it is a little bit practical also, because they are talking about things that are going to be there in the next 10 odd years or even less, rather than some other book which I've read about 50 years and how they'll put it in your brain and all that. This one is not going that far, and it's pretty good.
Right.
What is
Hiren, what
the
about
first
you?
one?
What have you been? Sorry, Ramdev, you
Tell
want
me
to
the
say
first book,
something?
which one you said? No?
Americana.
Yeah, I was asking.
Okay.
Americana.
Go ahead, Ramdev.
Yeah, Americana.
Okay.
By Bhu Srinivasan is the name of the guy. It's really good book. Really good.
Right. Hiren, what are you reading or researching these days?
Well, I've just started, I've just picked up this book, 10 and a half Lessons from Experience by Paul Marshall. He runs one of the most successful hedge funds globally. And I've just started reading it. So, but the first few pages that I've read is quite interesting. Again, Paul and his partner have been running money for almost 2 decades plus now. And it's great to read how various people who have been very successful, there is no one model of a successful money manager. There are several models of successful money managers. It's quite interesting to see what they have to say. But I read, I read various things from science to spirituality to investments to whatever.
It has helped in your process? Has it improved you as an investor?
No, I think it's not like in those early times where you read the textbook and then immediately you have to give a test, right? So you you just read and accumulate over a period of time. What circumstances come come to you. There are elements of everything that you read which might stay with you. It's impossible to at least in my case, to remember everything that you read. But I think there are a few important things that you kind of remember over a period of time. So, but it definitely helps. And I think reading from various disciplines certainly helps a lot, rather than just reading books on economics or business or investing.
Right.
Ajay,
Bharat bhai, what kind of stuff you read? Yeah, Bharat bhai.
Read on a wide variety of things. I love reading literature, poetry, crime and thrillers, science, philosophy, history, lots of different areas. I don't think I read merely to achieve a certain objective, which is whether it will help me in certain activity or a task. For me, reading is a joy. So it gives you a pleasure. Also reading, that itself is reward enough for me. Because if I'm reading, I'm with myself, and those moments are really precious, and I enjoy all the time that I spend in reading. It's like and for me, reading is a ongoing daily affair, much like you do ablution and you take bath. It is a daily activity, daily thing that you do. Uh, I would, and what Hiren talked about, mm, wide variety of areas. There has been a beautiful work called Lattice Work, which is
Which one?
exactly
Which one,
uh,
Bharat bhai?
Lattice Work,
Letter.
Yes, of
LUTICE.
course. Yeah.
So we talked about how knowledge in diverse branches, bits and pieces, which connect with each other in a way that you may not always immediately find it clear and upfront. But over a period of time, it builds a lattice work which connects all these seemingly disparate, different, disjointed pieces into something like a grand, unified kind of an system. I think reading is simply that there is so much to read and so much to enjoy, so much to understand. And we just have to remain passionate about the task. learning and pecuniary benefits of reading or help in the business is incidental advantage.
Right. All right, gentlemen, it was very interesting 1 hour learning your style, and I'm sure our viewers would have actually benefited a lot from your collective experience of